Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm taking you to the Ultra League Premier Cup, where a team of triple Johto starters just went on a 10-0 win streak to climb into the 2800s. Now, these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, A Shapster, so many thanks for that battle submission. Not only is it 3 Johto starters, but they're all Shadow as well. On the lead, the ever-deadly Shadow Typhlosion, Shadow Feraligatr as the safe switch, and as the closer, Shadow Meganium, a Pokemon that I would love to get a move update at some point to help increase its relevancy. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's go Johto. Hopping into the first match, picking up a bit of a scary lead, Shadow Typhlosion into Florges. Typhlosion will be hit for big super effective damage by the Chilling Water, but importantly, it will not one-shot. So Typhlosion is going to no-shield, go on for the Blast Burn, but a devastating catch and sneak by the opponent as they absorb the Blast Burn damage onto Skeleturge. Skeleturge just can't get the farm down. Typhlosion banks a Blast Burn for later and sends in Feraligatr. Feraligatr has a highly dominant matchup here, but unfortunately it's so far behind on energy. Shadow Ball lands, and Feraligatr will be able to neutralize Skeleturge, but it's lost almost its entire health bar. That's really tough, because the only healthy Pokemon remaining on this team is the Shadow Meganium in the back. Opponent reveals their final Pokemon, it's Komo-o. They try for an Ice Beam catch onto Florges, but Feraligatr is able to react in time and instead go for the Hydro Cannon. But anytime you're running a triple starter team, Fire, Water, Grass, when you see a Dragon, it's going to be a very difficult game to win, and made even more so by the fact that Florges leaves with a parting gift of a Chilling Water debuff. In an endgame like this, all damage is helpful, so Meganium is not even going to build up to the Earthquake, just going to fire off the debuff Frenzy Plant. Komo-o does end up no-shielding, but they do lose quite a bit of HP along the way. Komo-o with the upper hand bait gets the debuff, and that means the second upper hand is going to hit a lot harder. Meganium forced to burn both shields. There is a move still banked on Typhlosion from earlier in the game, but Meganium's going to have to get shields down. Frenzy Plant is going to be shielded. Meganium farming up. Oh, what a catch! Absorbing that upper hand onto Feraligatr. And now I think you just bring in Typhlosion. Typhlosion's low enough that they're not going to get a lot of farm with the Komo-o. Komo-o would need to exit with the upper hand loaded to win the game, but because the Typhlosion is so low, they just don't get enough farm. Back in comes Meganium. The debuff has now been reset. Frenzy Plant at full power. Frenzy Plant knocks out Komo-o, and that is a good game. Hopping into the next match, we see a gray lead, Shadow Typhlosion into Corvanite, but a Credilli safe switch is going to prove to be a bit problematic. Meganium gets brought in here because, at the very least, if you're going to lose switch advantage, you may as well throw away the one matchup where you can't do any damage to Corvanite. So Meganium is going to be brought in, basically just to be sacrificed, I would imagine. Meganium gets the land of Frenzy Plant for some very nice damage, but unfortunately, the acid damage has already added up enough that a second Rock Tomb will KO. In comes Typhlosion. Typhlosion looking for a farm down that unfortunately it cannot get, and Typhlosion will be forced to go for a Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch is resisted, but will KO the low health Credilli in the back. Oh my goodness, the opponent is double weak to Typhlosion. They have Lapras as their final Pokemon, and Typhlosion has so much stored energy. This game is going to get very difficult for the opponent. Typhlosion at 100 energy, that's 2.5 Thunder Punches. Thunder Punch is going to be no-shielded by the Lapras. Tries for a catch, but unfortunately, in the middle of an Incinerate, you're not going to get it. Ultra League Lapras is just so bulky. Typhlosion can't even Incinerate down, forced to try and snipe with Shadow Claws, but the Lapras hangs on, pivots out, and is Corvanite versus Feraligatr endgame. Corvanite, this is a bad matchup for it, but up 2 shields, Corvanite is honestly going to feel pretty fine. The thing the opponent has to be very careful of is all that banked Typhlosion energy in the back. The good news for Feraligatr is a shield finally gets used by the opponent. Corvanite will shield up as they go for the payback, but Corvanite will be able to outpace here by one singular turn, making the air cutter, knocking out Feraligatr, and this is going to be a tricky endgame. Typhlosion fires off the Thunder Punch. The opponent goes for a catch onto Lapras, so Lapras will get knocked out. Can Typhlosion survive the sand attacks? It's going to be close. Is this one sand attack range? The Typhlosion is very low. I believe it can hang on, and it does. Shadow Typhlosion had to go down 2 shields, but gets the reverse sweep, taking knockouts left and right to secure the win. We move to the next match, picking up a very nice lead, Shadow Typhlosion into Clefable. Opponent safe switches into Annihilate, and Annihilate will swiftly be answered with the Shadow Feraligatr. Feraligatr is going to get shredded by these boosted counters, so the shield will come up on the Rage Fist. Switch advantage would be very nice to maintain because Typhlosion is going to be walling off the energy from Clefable. Hydro Cannon shielded up by the Annihilate. These Shadow Claws are adding up, but now these counters are about to be at +2. Question is, can Feraligatr double up? It looks like it can. That's very good for Feraligatr. Opponent actually pivots out. They save the Annihilate, but in switch locking Clefable, they've now given Typhlosion the perfect opportunity to look to ramp up. Typhlosion farming up to the back-to-back Thunder Punches. Clefable will connect with a charge attack. It is going to be the Swift, so they're not actually walled. They're choosing to run maybe Swift Meteor Mash would be my guess. Usually I like to run Moonblast on my Clefable. Opponent makes a very ill-advised shielding decision, and that comes back to bite them as Typhlosion is at back-to-back, and that will just take the KO. In the back is Umbreon. They're able to make a catch at the Thunder Punch onto Annihilate, but the damage is already done. The Umbreon will get low enough that Meganium will be able to take it on. Umbreon is a Pokemon that I haven't seen for absolute ages. That really feels like a blast from the past. Even with the Foul Play buff, unfortunately, it just really did not make Umbreon substantially better because, unfortunately, Snarl is just an incredibly mediocre fast move. In comes Meganium. Foul Play is going to land, and look at the bulk on Meganium. Oh my goodness. Meganium just simply cannot be beat in this endgame. Frenzy Plant is going to land, and the CMP Sack Swap, the icing on the cake. You've got to be kidding me. Hydro Cannon knocks out the Umbreon and closes out that win in dominant fashion. We move to the next match, picking up a very scary lead, Shadow Typhlosion into Malamar. This is the regular Malamar, so not quite as scary as the Shadow, but even the regular should just neutrally beat this entire team, so it is a pretty scary Pokemon to see overall. Typhlosion gonna farm up, firing off the Thunder Punch at the Malamar. If the Malamar calls the bait, this could get tricky, but they do not. Instead, they put up the shield, Thunder Punch is banked, and in comes Feraligatr. Feraligatr is about to get rocked by a superpower momentarily. That does do some pretty substantial damage, and out comes Credilli. Credilli will survive a super effective Ice Beam, so I do really like the decision to go for the double Hydros. Hydro Cannon is fired off on the CMP tie. I did not see a sneak, and that is a very nice swing of momentum, because this will set a big farm for either Typhlosion or the Meganium. Rock Tomb will take the knockout, but this is just perfect farm range, and it's going to be Typhlosion. Typhlosion taking the free 20 energy as back in comes Malamar. Unfortunately, Malamar, with the residual energy, is able to outpace and force the final shield. Typhlosion at back-to-back Thunder Punches. Opponent's going to have to let this go because they know that Typhlosion is doubled up. They will no shield. In the back is a Volt Switch Fortress, and unfortunately, a blind pivot into Meganium. This game should still be a win just because Typhlosion has a move, and Typhlosion can always go for a snipe at some point, but I really would have liked to see those Incinerates melt down that Fortress. Earthquake is going to land. That's a -1 Earthquake. They're trying to overfarm as much as they possibly can, and Meganium will play to the CMP tie. Rock Tomb, it's just not going to be enough to knock out. Meganium is quite bulky, so Meganium is able to hang on. Earthquake is going to land double debuffed, but it's time. In comes Typhlosion, down goes Fortress, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, picking up a familiar lead and a pretty nice lead. Shadow Typhlosion into Clefable. Opponent save switches into Runerigus. And oh my goodness, this is a match that I never thought I would see in the Ultra League Premier Cup. Shadow Meganium versus Runerigus. Runerigus goes for the Rock Tomb, applying an early debuff. Meganium looking to return fire with the Frenzy Plant. Frenzy Plant will do some pretty substantial damage. Runerigus puts up the shield, really trying to make a play for alignment. Meganium is going to no shield. Can Meganium make it to the Frenzy Plant here? That would be diabolical. Oh my goodness, Shadow Meganium. I really wish that Meganium had a competent second charge move. I really feel like it could be a little bit interesting, but unfortunately Earthquake, it's not a great move. Meganium would really like if it got something cheaper as coverage. In comes Feraligatr, still no shielding. This is going to be the 2-shield Typhlosion show. You really have to hope that the opponent's final Pokemon is not going to be a Mud Slapper, but considering there was a Fairy-type lead, that's definitely possible, and no, it's Gastrodon. That is the worst case scenario. Even if it was a dragon, at the very least, you wouldn't be taking a lot of fast move pressure, but these mud slaps are adding up. But wait, Typhlosion, that Blast Burn did huge damage onto the Gastrodon. Typhlosion puts up the shield, undertaps the Blast Burn, and this Blast Burn may be enough to knock out. Blast Burn lands, down goes Gastrodon, in comes Clefable. Can Clefable get the farm down? No, they cannot. Clefable forced to fire off a charge attack. The shield comes up on the Meteor Mash. The Thunder Punch is locked and loaded, and I believe there's energy on the Feraligatr as well. Thunder Punch is going to connect. In comes Feraligatr. There is the Hydro Cannon. That was basically the one thing in the back that would have been game over, but fortunately Typhlosion's Blast Burns just hit way too hard, and they're still somehow able to get the win. Bit of a tricky lead in the next match, Shadow Typhlosion into Empoleon. Opponent safe switches into Oranguru. Oranguru is monstrously bulky. I imagine Typhlosion is probably going to look to send in the Meganium here because Meganium is just so incredibly bulky. And on top of that, it forces the opponent to go for a Brutal Swing, and non-stab Brutal Swing does not do a lot of damage into bulky neutral targets. So Oranguru goes for the Brutal Swing, and we see right away why that decision was a good one. Brutal Swing just does not hit very hard. Meganium, more than happy to absorb another Brutal Swing, look to overfarm to the back-to-back Frenzies, but a nice catch from the opponent. They're able to preserve the Oranguru and catch the Frenzy Plant onto Empoleon. But as much as that was a catch, that still did some pretty substantial damage. Meganium can knock out with Frenzy Plant number 2. Empoleon just gonna get fully sacrificed, throwing away the Empoleon, but saving the Oranguru. But Meganium is not done. Meganium, one final Frenzy Plant. That's gonna take a second knockout, and it's Unova Stunfisk in the back. Banking some energy on Meganium, the pivot into Typhlosion, full send into Blast Burn. Blast Burn is gonna be shielded. Opponent throws on Alignment, and an entire Incinerate goes through. Unfortunately, that Incinerate damage will not land because the shield will be needed for the Feraligatr. Feraligatr should be in a pretty okay spot because Discharge is a very mediocre move, so Discharge is not going to be one-shotting. Feraligatr gets the Fire off Hydro, and this is just going to be too much damage onto the Stunfisk. Hydro lands, Stunfisk now deep into the red HP, and Feraligatr knows it has a shield to use, but even if a Discharge lands, that's still fine. But a Discharge is not going to land. The catch onto the Meganium, oh, that is just absolute filth. Back in comes Feraligatr. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We've got a tricky lead in the next match. Shadow Typhlosion into Pangoro. This team does not have a fighting resist, which means no matter where Pangoro is aligned, Pangoro is going to be an absolute nuisance. Typhlosion shields up bait, and that forces Typhlosion to undertap. If Typhlosion tried to throw on proper timing, then Pangoro could have made a close combat and forced both shields while not having to give up a shield itself. Typhlosion, no shields this time, it gets the shield call right, no shielding that Night Slash. The opponent makes a nice catch as they absorb the Thunder Punch damage onto Grumpig. In the Ultra League, Grumpig does have some pretty decent bulk. So for Feraligatr, I don't think this Hydro Cannon will be enough to knock out. So for Feraligatr, it may have been better to actually look to overfarm quite substantially and then throw the Hydro when it would have KO'd. So that way Feraligatr can kind of control how much residual energy that it exits the matchup with. Feraligatr does leave with a few Shadow Claws, but unfortunately that's not enough to outpace the Panda. Pangoro launches Night Slash, that takes the knockout, and Meganium is going to have to be the star. Meganium's going to need to sweep this endgame. In comes Meganium. Pangoro is going to make it to the close combat, but a catch onto Typhlosion, absorbing what's hopefully a close combat, and it is. Means that Meganium can hopefully do well. In the back is Jellicent. Jellicent is monstrously bulky in the Ultra League, but Meganium's here to dish out the damage. Meganium launches Frenzy Plant. Oh my goodness, this poor Jellicent. Jellicent gets rocked. They make only one charge attack. Shadow Ball will be shielded, and Meganium is already basically at the back-to-back Frenzy Plants. Fortunately, by catching that close combat earlier, that was just a game winner. As Meganium makes the back-to-back, this Frenzy Plant will easily be knocking out that low HP Pangoro, and the win streak improbably continues. We see probably the worst case scenario in the next match, leading Shadow Typhlosion into Shadow Tyranitar. Tyranitar is going to absolutely destroy Typhlosion and destroy Feraligatr as well, so this is a pretty big problem. And add to that, the opponent's going to be pivoting into their own Feraligatr to absorb this energy. This is basically the worst case scenario that you could ever ask for. The opponent, however, makes a pretty massive misplay. They could have very confidently no-shielded and overfarmed, but they end up playing to a CMP tie that they do not win. They could have looked to overfarm and try and exit with residual energy, but they threw the Hydro Cannon instantly, and that decision to pretty poorly overfarm may open up a door here to a win con. Typhlosion, oh, just can't get that farm down, forced to instead go for a Hydro Cannon catch onto the Meganium. Meganium answered with a Corvanite in the back, and unfortunately, this is probably where the win streak dies. As Meganium, it's just helpless here. I believe in the main series, Meganium can learn Weather Ball Fire. I think it'd be incredibly cool to see Meganium with Weather Ball Fire, as that way it would have a move to hit Corvanite in this scenario, whereas it's just so helpless. There realistically is no way to win this game, because the Tyranitar is still just so strong into this Typhlosion. Back in comes Tyranitar. Typhlosion goes for a Thunder Punch, but Thunder Punch just will not knock out here. Thunder Punch is shielded, a misplay from the opponent. Maybe there's a chance. Maybe if they double shield, or if Typhlosion can get a big Incinerate farm down. Thunder Punch lands. That's quite a lot of damage. Very poor charge attack timing from the opponent. They only threw 2 Dragon Breaths instead of 4, and the move. Typhlosion gets that farm down. The opponent does have quite a bit of stored energy on that Corviknight. Back in comes the Corviknight. Corviknight will launch an Air Cutter. Shield comes up. Typhlosion has to avoid a catch. Typhlosion farms up. Opponent tries for a catch, and they don't get it. And that's back-to-back Blast Burns locked and loaded. And somehow, that game should have been so over. But against all odds, the opponent misusing their shields and failing catches means Corviknight gets roasted by Typhlosion, and that's a good game. All in all, this is a crazy team to go 10-0 in the Ultra League Premier Cup. It goes without saying, Shadow Meganium is not a Pokemon that you should use if you care about your elo, but that's part of what makes this win streak so impressive. Even against Dragons, even with Meganium getting switch-locked into a Corviknight one game, this team just managed to find a way, and with very careful gameplay from the battler Ace Shapster, he was able to wiggle his way out of some pretty dire situations. Shadow Typhlosion is a Pokemon that I really enjoy playing. I feel that it's really tough to use a lot of the time, especially in the Open Grade League where Talonflame is basically strictly better, and that's purely because of the influence of Mudslap. If we can ever get Mudslap substantially nerfed and Mudslap out of here, then suddenly Pokemon like Typhlosion could become quite a bit more viable, because then it's no longer a requirement that your fire type have a ground resist. Whereas in the current metas, it's really difficult to run a fire type that doesn't have a ground resist, aka just running Talonflame, because then you have to pair it with Pokemon that can beat Mudslap. And in this case, it's paired with the Feraligatr and the Meganium, which can both do pretty okay, but it definitely limits the kinds of teams that you can build. Whereas something like a Talonflame, you can get a little bit more variety of options when it comes to team building, because you can pair Talonflame with something that loses to Mudslap, whereas with Typhlosion, unfortunately, you cannot. But man, Ultra League Premier, seeing a triple starter team taking down opponents left and right, this to me really feels like the true essence of Ultra Premier. Even in a meta where bulky XLs like Licky Licky can dominate, I like seeing 3 starter Pokemon teaming up, 3 Shadow starter Pokemon at that, and just absolutely wreaking havoc and just completely obliterating opponents along the way. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please do leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.